Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Entitled Parents. Our first post is by Just Scrolling. My cousin's wife tried to put their young son on a plane flight with me. Oh boy, here we go. I've lurked on this subreddit for years but stopped due to the pandemic for mental health reasons. But I wanted to tell this story for a while now. Let's start from the beginning. It was my very first semester as a college freshman. I officially moved into my college dorm to start this new chapter of my life. I'm an international student, so it was a tough experience once reality settled. Thankfully, I had my cousin, whom I haven't seen in years, and his wife, who lived in Dallas, helped me with getting a US number, bedding, and school supplies. Fast forward to Thanksgiving break. I accepted my cousin's offer to go to Dallas for the break since it was better than staying in the dorms. I met his two kids, a son and a daughter. We catch up with each other, seeing how our lives went up to that point. The break ended and went back to college to study for finals. Then it happened. My cousin's wife asked for a favor via text. The favor: take their 8-year son home back to the Caribbean with me because his godmother wanted to see him. I told her that wasn't able to do that because I didn't know when my exams were finished. I actually did know when. I just told her that so she would leave me alone or do something herself. I already made up my mind with my mom's support that wasn't doing that. Fast forward weeks later. I was chilling in the airport minding my own business when my good cousin called me. He asked if I was doing something for his wife. I told no and explained myself. He thanked me, and I thought that was the end of it. But no. I saw her with their son holding a suitcase and a carry-on when I was walking to my gate. My cousin was nowhere to be seen. I asked her what she was doing. She gave some sob story of how his godmother wanted to see him and told him that he'll be good as he was hugging my leg. I was shocked. I felt my heart race. The groups were being called and I had to make a decision. Note: I just turned 18 at the time. I barely knew this child. I like to have everything in order and pre-planned to avoid confusion, and this would complicate everything. Furthermore, immigration would be on my case. Finally, I don't know who his godmother is or how she looks. I told her no, stating that if she wanted to do this, they could have planned a family trip together and not dump their kid on me. She said that she already bought the ticket and I might as well take him. I told her no again and went on my flight. My family was proud of me for standing my ground, as they didn't like her either. Turn out that sometime after or during the pandemic, my cousin and his wife got divorced. Understandable. His now ex-wife went behind his back, trying to get his son on an international flight when they could have planned a family trip together. Thanks for reading. Klutzy Amount writes in the comments, well done for not bowing down under pressure. You absolutely did the right thing. I can't fathom what goes on in the minds of people like this. I mean, how does that even make sense to anyone? Even if you had agreed, I would think you'd need, at least, notarized letters giving you permission to take someone else's minor on an aircraft, let alone to a foreign country. Our next post is by OK Interview. An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her. So, this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30M and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? ECT. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We notice that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees, and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine, neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell, and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot, and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of Huss Cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates, but I'll post an update when I learn more. Small update. My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty-looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift today. Update. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as some of you would hope for. So, I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said that the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information unless something happens again. I read a majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact Elder Abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say that they are abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living their best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, then that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can just cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can pretty much be applied about the elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbor was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion for any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in more of an inconsiderate way and not in an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of an asshole. I am, however, hoping that the patient press charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. If I hear anything more, I'll post another update. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.